So a man comes to Jesus by night. You wonder right off the bat why he has to come to Jesus at night, right? I mean, couldn't he use the office hours, right? Couldn't he, come during the day? Well, we're going to find out, because he's not just a man. He's a ruler. He is a powerful man. He's a leader. He's someone of authority, someone with power, and you can imagine someone like that, and you don't want your followers to see you looking weak and coming and sitting at the feet of some itinerant rabbi. So you sneak in at night. Makes sense. So he comes to Jesus, this powerful leader, and he starts by saying, now we know, if you go back and read Scripture, because when you're a leader, that's what they pay you to do. They pay you to know, right? All of you, almost every single one of you have been a leader or are a leader in some way. You know, your followers, they could be confused by things, and then they can say, which way should we go? And you are to know, right, if you're a leader. But the leader, he says, but we know that you must be sent from God, because no one could do what you do except they are sent from God. We know. And so Jesus just blurts out, you've got to be born often. Now, our video that we chose to use a couple of months ago for this, kind of the version it's used said born again, but that's not the term, it's anothen. And Nicodemus says, if you remember the story and as you heard it, Nicodemus says, how can you enter your mama's womb a second time and be born again? I think in the way my mind, as I read the text, Jesus must have said, especially I guess maybe at my age, Jesus must have said, turn up your hearing aids, Nicodemus. I didn't say born again, even though that was what the term they used. He said, I said born anothen. You've got to be born from above, is the translation. From top down, turned upside down, top to bottom, turned over again. That's the way you've got to be born. But how can this be? Nicodemus says. And then Jesus says, oh, the pneuma blows where it will. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, in my mind, Nicodemus has said, what do you mean the pneuma? Do you mean it like in an ordinary sense, which of wind? Or does it mean a more theological, sophisticated way like spirit? And Jesus says, yeah, right. Yeah, you got it. How? I think Nicodemus says, don't you find it interesting that when this rich, powerful man comes to Jesus and he says, how? It's the same way as we come today. God, you told us to do something, so now give us the best 4 principles that we can follow. We can write them in our notes on our bulletins on Sunday morning, and we do that as often as we can. But we want the most effective biblical principles of pneuma, or the wind, the spirit. So what techniques can we count on? What can we do that we can write down and follow? Jesus responds with 2 of the most mysterious, uncontrollable, unplanned, passive events that we as humans know. The wind, which cannot be controlled or commanded. I promise you, I come from the panhandle of Texas, and if we could have controlled it, we would have, right? Some of you have been there. And the other is birth. I mean, which of you decided when and to whom you were going to be born? or even to get born. Pneuma, anothem. So let's take a quick tour with Jesus this morning, because Jesus told a rich man at one point, when he said, what must I do to follow you? Jesus told him, he said, sell everything you have and give it to the poor, then you can follow me. To the woman caught in adultery, he said, go and what? Sin no more, right? But to this leader, this powerful ruler that comes to him at night, he says, you must be born from above. Now, think about this. Jesus only told one person that he needed to be born from above, born again, whatever term you want to use. And that person is someone that looks a whole lot like me, a professional church leader, and someone like you who is a leader and has been a leader in the community. Powerful people that make decisions that affect a lot of people. And Jesus tells him, you've got to be born in a different way. You've got to be born from above. This is the one time that he says, it's not about getting old. You have to stay refreshed and renewed. It's like you've got to be born of nothing. The only person he ever said this to was a person with responsibility and authority and power. Us. He said it to leader, someone in charge. How? How do we do this? And Jesus responds, oh, the pneuma will blow, right? The pneuma blows where it will. Like, that's not a good answer. Think about it. I mean, the whole process of this story, when you go back and read it, I hope you go back and read it after we talk today, you look at it, it seems like Jesus is playing with them. He says, the pneuma will blow. You hear the sound of it. You can feel it, but you can't call it in. You can't control it because the wind blows where it will. And so I wonder, is this a hard text for people like us? I mean, because remember, we're goal setters, right? We're goal achievers. You're an achiever. You've done what you've done. I've been amazed. I wished I would have counted just how many patents we have just in people, even before now, who have passed that are members of this church. I mean, this is a group of people who achieve. You're someone who makes plans. You're someone who knows how to bring people together and to move forward and get things accomplished. You've done that in your job, so many of you. And so then you ask, well, how? Come on, give it to me. How? What do I need to do? I'm ready. I'm willing. Just tell me how to do it. And then to be told, it's like the wind. It's like birth. It's not something you do. It's something God does to you. So maybe this is hard for us. But I'll just tell you right now, this is not a sermon about you or me. This is a sermon about God. Just totally about God, okay? So here's a question. What kind of a God would have called someone like you into leadership of God's people? Who would have done that? Who would have called me? So we're going to break up, and for the next 5 minutes, we're going to be in small groups, and we're going to discuss that. I'm joking, of course. Maybe the significance of your and my leadership is not what you get people to do, but what God does in you to get the people to do for God. Maybe that's what's significant. United Methodist Bishop Will Willimon wrote, I was reading some stuff he'd written, and he wrote a story. He was writing a story about a paper he read from one of his students about being called into ministry. And so let me just read you what Bishop Will Willimon said. This is a story that he shared. Here's the guy that he's talking to about his call to ministry. This young man says this. He says, I was a teenager from hell. I made my parents' lives miserable. They were shocked when I got into the University of Texas. Was this you? No, okay. Just making sure. Yeah. He says, I went to the University of Texas. They were not shocked when I flunked out the first year. So I lived off campus. I moved in with this woman, and we started doing a little drugs on the side. And then I met this Methodist preacher. And the next thing I knew, I showed up at this Methodist church. It was such a cool church, so I came back the next Sunday, and the next thing I know, they've got me working at the church in the soup kitchen. And the young man continues his story. And then one afternoon, I went to visit my parents. My dad is a doctor in a little town in Texas. I sat them down and said, well, it appears, I didn't think about this, but I'm feeling called into the ministry. I've gotten readmitted back into the university. I'm going to graduate this time, and then I'm going to seminary, and I'm going to be a Methodist preacher. And with that, his mother broke down in tears and said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. He said, embarrassed? And she said, yes. I don't know if I told you this, but I had 2 miscarriages before I had you. And when I had you, I knelt down by the bedside, just like Hannah in the Old Testament. And I said, Lord, if you let me bring this baby to term, I will dedicate him to your service, and I will call him Samuel. And Sam said, you did what? And she said, I didn't know it would work. I mean, this is something like Baptists believe. To which Sam responded, you could have saved me a lot of trouble if you had told me that story. I pity the people who give their lives to boring gods. Think about that. But how does it feel to be working with the God that is pneuma, that comes and goes? It's called grace. You see, if it's not grace, it's predictable, it's programmed, it's planned out to the max. You know exactly what's going to happen, but grace comes. Sometimes in the most unexpected times and places. You see, God is free to bless and not bless. I was listening to a couple of young men who had started new churches, and they've said they were making plans. They were planning out every hour of their week. They were planning out every program they needed to do. They'd read all the books, had done all the things to start their new churches, and they were working together in different places, but they were working together on this project. And they said, we've done everything we've done. We got our goals set for the week and our long-term goals. We pray, and what I heard them say was, our prayers are always this: oh, Holy Spirit, please show up. We know you were busy last week, but come on, please show up. We cannot do this again without you. Please show up. There's a story from a conversation that I was listening to from a member of the Board of Ordained Ministry. And he says they were talking about a certain person that has come before the Board of Ordained Ministry. And they said, personally, I don't approve of him myself. But for reasons known only to Jesus, he wants to work with him. God was blessing his ministry. The wind blows where it will. And sometimes this can be a good thing. Jesus said the wind blows where it will, and you can't control it or order it. What would we do with it if we could control God? I mean, when Jesus said this, did he mean it as a promise or a threat to this Jewish leader who had all this power and authority? You see, sometimes your failures in leadership are really not your fault, because you do what worked last time and you do the best thing you know how to do. You do all you know to do. But here's the thing, the work you do cannot be done alone or solo. It needs the pneuma. It needs God working with us. And admittedly, it keeps us nervous, right? I mean, you try something and it fails. You do the best you know how to do and it doesn't always work. And for reasons known only to a sovereign, free God, God does not bless it. But that's okay, because it's God. When that happens, we just go on and we try something else. We try to find and follow the path that God is leading us on. So this may be my point of the sermon. It's a real joy to work with that interesting of a God that is moving and blowing and in and out, and spirit going the direction it needs to go. Robert Jensen says this. He says, the way you can tell the difference between a living God, the true God, and a dead God that is an idol is that a dead God will never surprise you. Right? Dead people don't surprise anyone. It takes a living God to do that. Look back at your own lives. Look at your life, the twists, the turns, the surprises that you weren't responsible for. Oh, let me say, the pneuma blows where it will. And maybe one reason you said yes to following Jesus, maybe the reason that you responded to God when He called your name, is that maybe you wanted your life to mean more than it ever could have meant on your own. And you really relished the idea of getting swept up in a great wind, not of your own devising. You wanted to be a part of something greater than just yourself. The pneuma, God's Spirit moving in the place.